God has specifically chosen you to be here at this time and in this place. You have incredible potential, purpose, and calling to push back the darkness and be a light for Christ. Stand for nothing and you'll fall for anything. It's time to stand your ground. This is Unapologetic.
Hi guys, I'm Julianne Thompson and welcome back to another episode of Unapologetic. I am so glad you're here with us today. For this week's conversation, I'm excited to introduce you to someone who has worked with many authors and speakers you know and love, including people like Lysa TerKeurst, Tebow, Sheila Walsh, and more. This individual's name is Julie Carr, and she's a best-selling author, speaker, successful business owner, and on top of all of that, a mom of 8. Yeah, you heard me right. 8 kids. I am so excited to talk with Julie about writing, starting, and running her own media companies, and balancing motherhood with following her passions. Without further ado, Julie, welcome to the show.
Julianne, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yes, we are so excited, and I want to jump right in with a very important question, one that we actually ask every single guest. What should Christians stop apologizing for?
When I think about the notion of being unapologetic, I think a lot of times we think about the place that maybe we feel a little bit burdened in our culture to make apologies for what we believe in. But what if we inverted that question just a little bit? What if we were so known for a level of love and compassion and service that we were unapologetic for that? Unapologetically loving to everyone we encounter, unapologetically trying to replicate the kind of image and light of Christ to other people. So when I think about being unapologetic, I think of it that way. Unapologetically loving, unapologetically compassionate, unapologetically serving.
I love your background. It's one that I can actually really relate to. You started your career as a radio and TV reporter and anchor, and now you run your own media businesses and work as a writer and speaker. Did you always know this was going to be your career path you wanted to take, or how did this all get started?
So no, I really thought that I was going to be a psychologist, and I had a deep interest in child psychology. And on top of that, I always loved writing, always. But I considered myself a reading writer. And what I mean by that is I had so many books I loved. I felt so overwhelmed by the kind of talent that you see authors in their content. And I thought, oh, well, I don't know that I could ever do that. So I was finishing up my course hours. And I was one of these people that when I had to take other classes in order to fulfill all of my hours outside of my major fields of study, I tried to concentrate them in certain areas. And I got up and did a presentation in a class, and it was over a summer. So you know how in the summer, those classes are like really concentrated. You're together a lot of the time and everything. And this guy came up to me after the presentation and said, "Your voice, I really want to talk to you about that." And I thought, oh man, this is a really complicated way to ask for a coffee date, but whatever. He claimed to be some, yeah, exactly. I was like, whatever. And Julianne, what I thought was going to be some kind of really, flimsy excuse for trying to ask me on a date actually turned out he was the manager of a radio station. He actually did hire me as a result of that audition. From there, I was hired to go on to a morning show and then a television station, a CBS affiliate. Discovered me. And so that ended up being the early part of my career, which was completely accidental and me thinking that it was just a long play to get me on a coffee date. You just never know what God's going to do with your story.
That is a great story. You really never know who's watching or listening, who you're surrounded by. So you went from radio and TV to now starting your own businesses. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey?
When I was in television and I discovered I was pregnant with my first child, and my husband and I had not been married a really long time, we had, Julianne, the ultimate 10-year plan. And just a little while into our marriage, we discovered that we were unexpectedly expecting. And that turned everything because we'd been very, very career driven to that point. Now, we were so excited about this baby coming, but a lot of the stuff that I was doing in television at the time, I was doing a lot of true crime stuff and things like that. And that felt really heavy. And I didn't know how on earth I would be able to do the things that I was doing in media and then come home to this little baby and be somewhat unscarred by some of that. So I made the decision at that time to step back from this full-time run in television. And I started doing a lot of different things, advertising, voiceover work, writing copy, things of that nature, helping with some video production, just little bits and pieces everywhere that I could. And then there were more kids that came along the way, as happens. And so I was doing all of this sort of as a little cottage industry, ended up going into full-time ministry for quite a long stretch. And in the midst of that, ended up being contacted by a publisher, wrote a couple of books. They asked me to do some collaborative writing with some of their other authors and speakers. And over time, in that way that things will happen, you turn around twice and you're like, wow, this is like a little business, was how I thought of it at first. And this is one of the things I think sometimes we do as women, Julianne, is we discount what God's doing in our life. We sort of treat certain things like hobbies, and we don't understand that what God is doing is building something for us, building something for our families. So that's kind of compressing a lot of time and a lot of different little avenues into a way now that I can stand back and go, oh, God was using all of those little things, all those little freelancing moments to ultimately bring it together into what is now this media company that I'm running.
Yes, and you actually are in charge of two businesses, Ghostly Pro and Carr Consult. I want to get into both of them. So can you start by telling us a little bit more about Ghostly Pro?
So Ghostly Pro is a collaborative and ghostwriting service. And one of the things that we're finding that's really unique in the age of social media is we have people who have an incredible message that they want to share. And we know there's an audience for those people because people have been coming alongside to hear their stories and are engaging with them on social media. And yet some of these folks would be very honest and would say, I love being a storyteller. I know how to do that in a social media format. I'm not a writer. And they need someone to come alongside and help them take their concepts, their ideas, and build those into an actual book process when they're approached by various publishers and things of that nature. Mm-hmm. And the person that I work with quite a bit in Ghostly Pro, she is fantastic at being a matchmaker. She is someone who can take a look at someone's message at their platform and say, you know what? We have a writer who would be a great fit for you. And so I've helped train several of these writers, and we just come along and try to find the right fit for someone who has a great story to tell, but is going to need some help getting that story over the line. So that's Ghostly Pro.
And then tell us about your other business, Carr Consult.
Carr Consult is my business in which I come alongside, again, individuals, but also entities, whether that is a business, say, in the healthcare industry or data management, all the way to helping those who are in ministry and trying to develop messaging and ideas around some of the things that they're going to be speaking about, whether that's in podcasting, in their public speaking, or in their writing. I also do work on various websites and things of that nature, really helping someone find their voice to be able to tell their story in an authentic way. So whether that is a company and a brand, all the way to an individual, with Carr Consult, I come alongside and help in that process.
I do feel like books are becoming really popular today. I feel like people are drawn and wanting to start their own books by writing and publishing them. If someone was thinking about this, how would they even get started writing a book and then publishing it?
Julianne, I think one of the toughest things for people when they're starting to get started is to really understand that you can have all the ideas in the world. You can have all the cool tools. You can find all the platform that you think would be the best way in which to record this information. But if you don't actually sit down in the seat and get your fingers on the keyboard, it's not going to happen. And I know a lot of people who they get really trapped in that ideation process. So I think first of all is to really ask yourself, am I really willing to sit down and do what it's going to take? Because writing takes a long time. I will have people come to me who initially think they're going to do a project on their own, which I am all about cheering people on in that process. But they actually sit down and look at how long it takes them to get 500 or 1,000 words onto the page. And there's this revelation of, oh, this is probably going to take longer than a month. And I'm like, yeah, it probably is. I think the second thing that we have to be really thoughtful about anytime we're writing, and I think this goes for fiction or nonfiction, so many of us want to write something that we think is going to appeal to the widest number of people possible. I often speak with people who say, I want a book that can reach everyone from the octogenarian to the 8-year-old. The problem with that is a really difficult thing to accomplish. If your book is not specific for someone, it may not be for anyone. When we really understand that person that we believe God's given us a message for, whether that's in business or in life or in spiritual walk, and we focus on that person in our mind's eye, it helps that writing feel like more of a conversation, whether that is fiction or nonfiction. So I would say those two things, really understanding what you're signing up to do, not to be overwhelmed, to be honest about it. What is the time commitment I'm making here? And secondly, to have a very clear understanding of who you're speaking to. Those two things I think that really helps people get over the hump when it comes to tackling a project of this size.
You don't only just help people write books, you're a very accomplished writer yourself. You have 2 books. I want to hear about Raising an Original first. I think this is such a clever title. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about what inspired this book?
One of the things that I realized was a real challenge in my own parenting, and that I was seeing it a lot where I was serving vocationally in ministry, was that as parents, we have so much flying at us in terms of information. We have all these parenting styles today that are now touted as the way to raise kids. And in all of it, you're trying to discern, well, then what do I do? What do I do? And sometimes you try things that seem to be working really well for your next door neighbor and are just a fail with your kids. When I rewound all the way back and I went, okay, wait a minute. I have a degree in psychology and I had an emphasis in child psychology, and maybe I need to look a little bit more clearly at some of the tools I received then. What was there right in front of me the whole time, Julianne, is what really began to emerge. Each of our children are so distinct and individual. They are originals. And when we try to cookie cutter our way into parenting, it's not going to go well because what works for one is not always going to work for the other. Now, when I was getting my psych degree at that time, we felt like that a personality, you didn't necessarily see a whole lot that was emerging until maybe a child was around 12. The research continued through the years. We had more longitudinal studies coming out, and we began to realize that personality was far more evident far earlier than we ever thought. It really drove home to me just how unique God makes us. I know that's a simple message, but I think it's one that we can lose all too easily. Now, the 180 degree from that is getting into a lane where we believe our child is the special snowflake and is more original than your child, where we think our original trumps your original. No, we're not talking about kids who, in understanding and coming into their own identity that God created them to be, we're not talking about letting that run over anybody else. We're talking about what a beautiful thing and what a needed message in today's world when who you are, who God created you to be, the challenges you have, the sin nature you have, the gifts you have, the strengths you have, that is something that matters and is valued and is important within our communities and within our families. So that's the balance that I hope to help people achieve with raising an original. And there's some tools in the book that help you understand more about your child's personality, exactly who they are, different approaches to think about, and then the overlay of your own personality. This is the part I think in a lot of our parenting techniques that we look at that we forget that we are bringing a filter to it. So you can pick a particular lane of parenting style, but you're probably going to pick the one that you think would have been best for you, or the one that you think as a kid you might have responded to the best, but that's specific to your personality. So we have things that have a varying set of thresholds for us as parents based on who we are. So to also understand who you are in this dynamic of parenting is a really important one to help kind of tease yourself out of it, to be able to see your child for who they are, and then to understand what you bring to it with your personality. And when you can find that dance, that choreography, to me, that's the place in parenting that gets really sweet, gets really on point, gets really on purpose, where people truly are honored and valued for who they are. And kids feel that.
I think that is so needed. And I would love if you would be willing to share maybe a few of those signs that parents should look for and recognize in their children. Are you able to share any of those with us?
Absolutely. So there was a guy back in the day named Marsden. So anyone who has taken the DISC assessment, if you're familiar with that, it's usually a capital D, lowercase I, S and a C. He developed this assessment. He's also the guy who came up with the technology for the lie detector test. He's also the guy who came up with the concept of Wonder Woman as a comic hero. He's a complicated, controversial guy, but he's the one who really launched into some ideas on personality theory. So for Raising an Original, I repurposed some of that to just give us a simple way to look at our kids and ourselves. There are all kinds of personality assessments out there that might be considered more authoritative or more scientific at this point, but I just wanted to give something simple so that we could all get our heads around it. So in the way I look at it, I call the D the director, the I the inspirer, the S the steadfast, and the C the curator. And we are all somewhere within those four, and usually something of a blend. So I will talk about, say, for instance, you have an inspirer. Now, the inspirer and the steadfast, in their value system, relationship is their top value. For the director and the curator, their top value is accomplishment of project. They want to get stuff checked off their list. The director does it by leveraging people. The curator does it by leveraging a label maker. With the I and the S, the inspirer and the steadfast, they just want to make people happy. They want to be very deep in relationship. And to some degree, the project is secondary. So let's say you're a curator. Let's say that you're a mom, that your pantry looks like it could be on Pinterest. You have really cracked the code on knowing how to label everything, and everything's aesthetic and it's all amazing. And God gives you a kid who's an inspirer. And so you go up to that kid's room and it is a complete disaster. And you go, okay, you need to get in there. You need to get that room clean. And I mean, you've just got to get this knocked out. So you retreat. You're leaving the inspirer to go do it because frankly, you're now in a case of hives after having looked at this room. Your kid comes back down after about 10 minutes, is like, I'm done. I got it all done. It's great. And you think, yeah, right. You go back up the stairs and you look, there's a path. Julianne, it's just been carved kind of from the door of the bedroom, like maybe over to the bed.
I can picture it now.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. And the kid's like, I did it. Was this kid being disobedient? Well, no. This kid does not have the same eye you do. This child does not have the same gift. This child, because of their gift for relationship, was like, let's knock this out as quickly as possible so I can get back to what's most important to me, which is spending time with my mom, spending time with my siblings and my friends. So what do you do as a curator mom? Do you just throw it all to the wind and say, oh, forget it. I've got this inspirer kid and the room's always going to be a disaster? No, it's about cooperating with the personality style that God has given them. Is it going to be as convenient as the curator child in your life who always has their room clean? No. Is it going to take different muscles? Yeah. Are you going to grow as a person as a result? Yes, you are. And so it is possible to cooperate with the temperaments that God has given our kids. We don't have to crush them. We don't have to fight it. We don't have to do any of that. We can work with it when we understand the temperament that our child has.
You also have another amazing book, Footnotes, which is geared towards women in a Bible study, which has such a unique twist as well, talking about characters in the story who may not be huge names, but have such a big purpose in God's plan. Can you maybe tell us a little bit about how you thought of this idea in the first place?
I love looking into history for those little known people who end up having a big impact. And when I took a look at characters in the Bible, and I thought, who are the people, we've got all the ones that we typically know. Even people who aren't of faith could probably name some of the ones that we all know. But then there are these folks that sometimes we don't even get a name for them. Sometimes we do have a name, but it's just a mention. I became really fascinated to see what their lives could teach us, and to even look at some of the people that we might consider a bad guy in the situation. And so that became the genesis of a real deep dive into a variety of people that we call the footnotes. I in particular became quite fascinated with Quirinius, who was a Roman governmental official. And it was through a lot of his work that we end up with the census needing to be taken. Now, he was someone who had a very storied military career. He was quite the political animal. He came from a family of influence, and he also had a ton of grit. But we don't remember him for all the things that he probably thought during his lifetime he would be remembered for. He's a footnote in the Bible. It's one of the only reasons we even recall him today. And it's because of the role he plays in the story of Jesus being born where it was prophesied Jesus would be born.
That is truly incredible. I think it's such a unique take and one that's not really talked about a lot. But in addition to all of the amazing work that you do, you're also a mom to 8 kids. I have to know, what is the secret? How do you balance being a mom and running your own businesses and being an author and all the things? Please tell us.
Oh, well, I've said for several years, I don't know if this will be very encouraging, Julianne, but I've said for several years that I don't really believe in balance for the most part. Now, I'm not talking about not taking a Sabbath. I'm not talking about not resting, because obviously God talks to us about doing those things. But it seems to me like we have seasons that are spurts, sprints, and then strolls. And those seasons are really important to note where you're at, because we can't always just stay in a spurt. We can't always just stay in a headlong sprint. But if we're only strolling, we may not always be getting to the things that we intend to get to. And so the way I look at it is there have been those seasons with my kids where I had to do kind of a big burst of energy, and then we were able to stop for a little while. Then there have been those places where we had to get all the way around the track. We had to do a true 440, and it took quite a sprint to do it. But then there was a pause. And then there were those seasons where things seemed to slow down a little bit, but move at a little bit more of a steady pace. That mindset helped me a lot, because I kept looking for this ephemeral miracle called balance. And while I was doing that, I was always beating myself up, because in that thing of calling it balance, still expected somehow, Julianne, all the things to be done. That was my version. Mm-hmm. We have seasons in which we can't accomplish the thing that's in front of us, but we're probably going to have to let go of a few other expectations and things that are not going to serve us in that moment. And Lord willing, depending on the length of days he gives us, we'll come around to having the house that's perfectly decorated for Thanksgiving or Christmas. We'll come around to the landscaping looking just like we wanted, or tending the garden in the back, or chasing the career at the full out that we wanted to be able to a few years ago. But to understand that it just depends on where you are in the race as to what is required. That's the only balance now that I really know.
I honestly love how honest and real and vulnerable your answer is. And that's the reality is, as women, we are all wearing so many hats, whether if it's being a mom to 8 kids, or being the perfect wife, or wanting to have the perfect career, or being the best daughter. We put so much pressure on ourselves to do incredible things and to do it all. So I love that, it ebbs and flows in so many different seasons. So how would you encourage moms specifically that they can be the best mothers that they can be, but they can also pursue their God-given talents to the best that they can be? That you don't have to choose, that you really can do it all.
I think one of the things that we have sometimes failed to do for moms is to ask of ourselves, and to ask of those women coming up behind us, who are you really? Really? Who did God create you to be? Because now, Julianne, we have more inputs than ever trying to tell us who we're supposed to be. Mm-hmm. You may be someone who loves being at home with your kids, and you're very fulfilled in that way. And yet you have a friend who is pursuing a little cottage industry kind of thing, or she's freelancing, or she's at the office all day, and you start feeling bad. Well, should I be more quote unquote driven? I don't know why we equate being driven with being in a different type of vocation. You can be a very driven mom, driven to doing the right things for your kids, driven to making sure that they are having the kind of childhood you want, right? So you can have that comparison. You can be the mom who is doing all this other stuff because you feel that that's expected of you, when all you really want to do is take a pause and focus on your little bitty kids, because you know they're not going to be little for very long. So that's the place that I want to encourage moms. You have never been a mom before. Your kids having this real-time experience with you where you are learning it as you go. To maintain a place of saying, I don't pretend to know it all. I am learning more and more about myself. I didn't know this about myself until I became a mom. I didn't know that this might be important, or this might be something I'd be willing to let go. To give voice to that, to continue to be able to understand who you are, is going to give your kids such an incredible gift. We do not want to be trying to figure out who we are through our children, through our kids' accomplishments, through our kids' behaviors, through how we think people are perceiving our children. we've got to do the work first as grown-up women to understand who we are, what drives us, and what that means in terms of the template we're going to put over the life God has given us with the individuals he's entrusted to us.
So tell us more about your All Mom Does podcast and why you decided to start your own podcast. What are some of the topics you tend to focus on, and how have you learned through the expertise of your guests and other moms?
Yeah, All Mom Does, we are heading into our 7th season, which is mind-blowing to me.
Wow, congratulations.
It started out, thank you. It started out as just, hey, where's a place we could have some conversation of inspiration and encouragement for women for the lives they're living, for the work they're doing, for the marriages they're nurturing, for the kids they're raising, for the spiritual journey that they're on. How can we do that? And very quickly, we realized that there were lots of ways to have that conversation. Some of the episodes you'll find are very practical with different things. Some of them are emerging because, for example, we are finding higher numbers of kids than ever that are grappling with anxiety. We have a lot of children in a post-COVID experience and generation who have some things that we need to talk about because they had a tumultuous 3 years, which, depending on their age, could have been a quarter or half of their life. So yeah, we have both things that I think are timeless in terms of the guests we have on or the topics that we tackle. And we have things that are very emergent in a way that really tickles my former journalist bone that I get to talk about. So
yes.
Yeah, we try to hit all of these things. And then we also launched, which has been a lot of fun, just a couple months ago, a little 5-minute podcast called God on the Go. And it is 5 minutes for when you're in the car, taking your kids to soccer, getting in the school drop-off line, whatever, a little 5-minute lesson and a little trivia fact and some discussion questions so that you can make the minutes matter with your kids.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you, it seems like you are never short on projects and goals and dreams. What's next for your career as a writer and a business owner?
I have a couple of things upcoming. I've got a couple of big collaborative projects that are coming to a quick close, which have been really fun and very different. One is a business book that is really fascinating. Another one is one that will be coming out from a faith leader in a while. And that one has been a lot of fun to work on as well. For myself, there's always that place as a writer that I don't know if this would be hubris or not, but there are things that you do want your name attached to. There are those projects that you want to say, hey, this is my story, and this is something I've been thinking about. I have currently a couple of novels that live on my desktop that I would love to have see the light of day. Mm-hmm. And then I continue to have a couple of nonfiction messages that I'd like to get out there, particularly because raising an original has been so much fun. I do love talking on parenting. And I am hitting that season now where we've got kids who've launched and we are entering a new season. And I'm exploring what that means, both as a woman to be someone who has kids who've launched and what that means in my generation, which I think is looking a little different than it's looked in some past generations. And so that's something that I have a real heartbeat for, doing a lot of speaking on that and continuing to love exploring that topic as well.
Well, that is incredible. And I can't wait to cheer you on. You are just, Julie, truly an inspiration to all moms out there, to all career women. Please tell us how we can stay in touch with you and your work.
Well, you can find me at julielylescarr.com. So that's JulielylesCarr.com. Julie Lyles Carr on Instagram and all the places, but I usually hang out on Instagram the most. And you can also find links to the podcast on my website and through Instagram, all those kind of places. It's the All Mom Does podcast and God on the Go. And so I hang out there a lot too.
Thank you so much, Julie, for taking time out of your very busy schedule to visit with us today.
Julianne, it was my honor. Thanks again so much for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Unapologetic. Remember, you can get other episodes and more at ptv.org/Julia.